Welcome to Devil's Advocate, a show where I discuss both the pros and cons of a particular subject. Tonight's subject will be about internships, whether you are pro or against them. So let's get into it.
I'll start off by saying that if you can't create a business and it's not sustainable, that's not an excuse to then force your workers to just not get paid and, calling them interns, right? And so it's the whole idea that you're trying to profit off of someone. Regardless of whether they're skilled or unskilled, you are still trying to profit off of someone to then grow your business and grow your brand, etc. So it's just a non-starter for me for someone that would then have to do free work in order to then get paid to do work for you, right? It's just like, so you're telling me I need to pay you in order for you to pay me. Now just imagine that in like the business form, right? That, okay, say two businesses are talking with each other and you say, yeah, let's strike a deal, I'll give you this and then I'll just do an IOU and I'll pay you back later. And like, no, businesses don't work like that. And that's seemingly what internships are trying to do. It's a business trying to say, hey, I'll pay you back later. Maybe I'll pay you in the future. But as of right now, I actually don't have the money to pay you. And also, maybe I could help develop your skills too. It's that whole fucking gimmick, right? I'll pay you in exposure type of thing. So now the problem with the entire esports industry, and a lot with other industries as well too, is the fact that interns, the only reason why they exist is because there's so much of an abundance of workers that are willing to work for free. So it's kind of fighting against each other to say, hey, I'll do this for minimum wage. And then someone says, hey, no, I'll do this for half of minimum wage. And someone says, well, I'll do it for a quarter. And then eventually you get to this point to where now people are willing to work for free just to be within the space itself. And this goes for multiple different industries and spaces. So we've gotten to this point to where now it's just super perpetual and there's no way that we can get out of the cycle just because it's already been a standard anyways. And you can't stop people from not working, and saying that, hey, I will work for free. You can't really stop that movement. But that doesn't make it any more morally correct. And so, and as such too, as a business standard to model your business after that, as one of the fundamental bases in order to help you, that's really not that great of a business model either, because your returns are so small in the very beginning anyways, because, as the common argument goes, usually an intern is an unskilled worker. So it's going to take them multiple hours just to do something that maybe someone could accomplish in 30 minutes, if they are a skilled worker. So at the end of the day, I think the entire internship esports industry is just trying to take advantage of a lot of these young people. In fact, oftentimes it is young people, but sometimes you still find people that try and get into this burgeoning industry and they're older or whatnot. But overall, I just think the entire thing is a mess, and really I don't like that. Because esports is such a progressive industry, I don't like how it's using this regressive model, something from the past and something from universities, which notoriously take advantage of young minds and whatnot, and help these other industries or whatnot that also try and take advantage of them too. I just think it's incredibly wrong and like really just morally off the wrong foot, so to speak. Well, didn't realize my opponent was Gandhi, in fact. No, but in all seriousness, internships allow usually for young people to get in an industry and have kind of a foot in the door, so to speak. And it's because, well, if you don't have any job experience, and let's face it, if you're young, the likelihood that you're going to have significant amount of job experience, and in fact in any industry, is pretty low. So this is one way in order to get your foot in the door and kind of gain some experience, because at the end of the day, only people are going to hire you based upon experience. There really is no other measurement that allows you to then get into a job market, and especially a job market where it requires high skills, right? Very high and prized skills. So internships are one slow stepping stone in order to do that. On top of that, internships usually deal with universities as well too. It doesn't always have to be, but it deals with universities, and so you can kind of get some job experience right from the get-go while you're still doing your degree at the same time. So it's like killing two birds with one stone when you think about it. And another factor is that, well, with internships, my opponent is saying, oh, well, you're basically using someone for free labor, right? And if you have a business model that is, one part of it is centered around free labor or internship, then you're running your business incorrectly. Well, the second and obvious point that he's missing is that, well, no one's stopping them from, not working for me. So it's their choice. Why would you prevent someone from, trying to get into an industry and doing it of their own will? It's not like we're doing like a slave labor type of thing, right? So at the end of the day, I think it's very beneficial for both parties, in fact, because like I said, it gives them a lot of job experience and whatnot. And now, I don't think that people are especially being taken advantage of, and even in esports. And now, he also said that, okay, well, yeah, it's a very archaic system, and esports is supposed to be this forefront of progression and innovation and whatnot. And it's like, yeah, that's true. Esports is very innovative, but that doesn't mean that you just throw everything out that has also worked for, multiple years, in fact, in other different industries. Internship has been around for a really long time. And if you go back even further, internship really is just another word for apprenticeship. And apprenticeships have been around for a very long time, right? So you can't just then say that whole system is null and void. It's been working for a really long time. So just to swath it over and say that it's ineffective and it's the old way and whatnot, I just think is quite ignorant, in fact. So that's my whole stance on internship as a whole, and as such, as a business, I think it's a very viable way, and I don't think it is actually an avenue for businesses to take advantage of interns and whatnot. In fact, I think it's more of a benefit for the intern than it actually is for the business, because as he said before, yeah, it is going to take an intern 3 hours to do something when it would normally take a skilled worker 45 minutes to do. So I see no harm in that entire factor, because really they aren't a significant portion as to help how a business grows anyways, in fact. So I like how you actually mentioned about, internship not being slave labor, right? Because they have the freedom of choice and whatnot. Well, let's bring up the whole idea of minimum wage, right? So for the audience that doesn't know, minimum wage in North America, there is a federal minimum wage and then there is a state level minimum wage, right? So usually states will have a higher minimum wage set than the federal one, but the federal one is like the one that you must have. And right now I think it's at about $7, I want to say. So with that said, the state of Alabama, they actually operate off of the federal minimum wage, which is $7. I think it's $7.25. And so what happens is now all of these businesses now operate off of $7.25 for their minimum wage workers, which is, by the way, it's pretty small, but you have to also include in the fact that, well, in Alabama, the cost of living is quite low. The housing market is quite low, like rent and whatnot is quite low. Like you can't compare it to a place like here, Los Angeles, right, where the minimum wage is about to be $15 an hour. So, double of what Alabama is. But you have to consider Los Angeles is actually like a metropolis, right, of the entire world, right? It's one of the major cities of the world. Anyways, whole point is that the state of Alabama actually is trying to nickel and dime their entire citizenship. And even worse, if you get, say, a restaurant job, And, as many people know within North America, there is a tipping culture, right? So you give a person some money for a service, right? And depending on the level of service that they give you. So say, for instance, a waiter usually gets tipped within North American culture. Well, guess what? Alabama actually includes the tips into that person's wage. So that means if someone makes $5 an hour, that means that they can actually pay that worker $2 an hour. So just instances like these, we can already see that a lot of businesses, in fact, try and pay their workers the very bare minimum just because they're trying to nickel and dime and create the best margins that they can do for their entire business. And I see no difference within internship, in fact. So I like your talk about Alabama, in fact, because did you know that Alabama is actually the 48th lowest state in the entire nation with the median cost of living? So that also means that realistically, they're at the very, very, very bottom end when it comes to cost of living itself, right? So obviously they're going to get paid less in order to match the lifestyle of Alabama itself. So that's just a complete non-starter. I just think that you're ignoring a lot of the statistics in the back end, in fact. Now, as I said before, job experience is so prized in a lot of different industries. And now, when you consider that and just any other industry that has likely existed for quite a long time, now you compare that to esports, which is a very new industry. So in fact, how are you going to be able to hire someone based upon qualifications? You aren't. You just aren't. There are no qualifications because the actual industry hasn't lived long enough for there to be people within the workforce that kind of already know how to do esports, right? And so you have to have intern positions within this industry, or else there's no other way for people to properly learn about the industry itself. So that's the whole reason actually why interns exist a lot within esports, is because it's just so brand new and there's no other way to get qualifications, well, unless you get an esports certificate, I guess. But jokes aside, I actually think that's quite a decent idea, in fact, because there is no standardization of exactly how someone is qualified to work within esports, whether that be, a team manager, a journalist, someone in statistics for an esports team, someone doing office work and whatnot, and knowing how to actually handle esports numbers, because they're quite different than just your average accounting, right? So there are just a whole bunch of different slew of things, in fact, that are brand new, and you kind of need to know the space in order to do so. So the whole point being is that, internships, sure, you're saying that in other industries it's very taken advantage of and whatnot. And maybe to some degree I could agree with you, because those industries have existed for quite a while. But in esports, that's actually not the case. So you say that esports is this burgeoning region, and that, of course, they're going to need interns because no one has experience in the entire industry. But okay, let's make that comparison to something like, I don't know, electric vehicles. You think Elon is just going to have a whole bunch of unpaid interns and whatnot and run his business and kind of make it profitable through that efforts? No, that's not going to fly at all, in fact. Aside from that, he actually is getting paid a lot because of subsidies from, the US government, but we'll put that to the side a little bit. But the whole idea is that if your business isn't profitable, then you shouldn't even be in the industry. So did you know that the rate, as far as the margin for construction companies, is about 5%? Only 5%, in fact, right? Another industry, restaurants, in fact, operates with a very low margin. So for those people that don't know, margin basically means how much money that you make over the cost of what it is to run the business itself, right? So 5% profit is very low profit, right? Unless you're making, like billions of dollars, then yeah, 5% is pretty good. But if you're only making, a cool million or something, 5% really isn't shit. What is that? I think that's 50 grand, in fact, in profit. So it's not very good. So with that said, they have a 5% margin. Even them and some construction companies, or rather restaurants, are very successful, in fact. So there's no reason as to why an esports team or esports industry itself can't be profitable at least up to the 5%, right? And so it's actually absurd to think that you would then have to put that cost onto these interns. Are interns in the restaurant industry? Are interns in fucking construction? No, like that's usually not an industry that has interns. So, and even they are able to make their margin up. And so personally, my business, in fact, I run a business and I have to consider my margins, right? And my margins are way bigger than 5%. And that's because I try and run my business as highly profitable as possible. And certain things that I can move up the price, and certain things I have to move down the price, and maybe it's even below margin, but it's more of a luxury item to get the customer in order to then buy more things, right? So this whole management of margin is something that I think is completely lacking in terms of esports teams and inside the entire esports industry. And it actually shows how esports teams or owners don't know actually how to run a business, in fact. Great. So what you're doing is you're comparing the construction or the restaurant industry into what is essentially an entertainment industry, esports, or a talent industry, in fact. Like that's just a non sequitur. I don't think that you can just do A equals B equals C. It's not how this works, and I know exactly what you're doing. So really what it is that if people want to work for free and to get the skills that they need in order to be successful, then I don't know why you would necessarily want to stop them, in fact. And I think that's just a ridiculous notion, right? So if you aren't good at your job, why should I have to pay you, right? Like if you aren't really progressing the business at all, why should I have to pay you? It's basically forcing all of the cost onto the employer. And in fact, I think that's actually absurd because you don't have any redeeming skills in order to be paid anyways. I'm kind of doing this out of the kindness of my heart because you need job experience in order to get into this industry. Not only that, it's helping the industry because it's allowing for people that are incompetent. And I know that the whole word incompetent gets a bad rap, but it just means that you aren't competent at a specific task or job, right? So it is true. So anyways, the fact that I'm allowing this entire industry to then get competency to then now we can have more skilled workers and we can actually pay people appropriately, in fact, and maybe we'll have an actual industry in the future, right? That's the whole point of why we're doing internships to begin with. So it's absurd to say that, say esports writing, that I would have to pay an esports writer given the fact that they actually don't know how to write and whatnot. They barely have any examples of their writing. I don't know, maybe they have 3 posts on Medium and whatnot. I mean, hell, I ended up working for free, in fact, over at the Shot Caller. I did basically an internship over there with Darius, who has an actual degree in journalism, right? And I actually learned quite a lot. So yeah, sure, would I like to be paid? Yeah, of course, everyone loves to be paid. Everyone would want to get paid if they could get paid, regardless of whether they are skilled or not. But the whole point is that you can't justify that you should be getting paid, and especially given that the fact that he was able to give me skills in order to, be successful later on as I did more writing and, did more interviews and whatnot. So it's completely absurd to say that interns of their own will should, have to be paid for the work that they do. In fact, when they don't even do the work, as a quality standard, in fact, and it's more quantitative than qualitative, right? Great, and how'd that pan out for you? Now you're making videos talking and arguing with yourself. But anyways, so let me break a little trivia here for you. So, in fact, the California law states that in order to be an intern and not get paid, basically, the intern cannot displace a regular employee. So what this means essentially is that they can't do work that would normally be done by a regular employed employee, right? So you can't have them, make up for someone's job. Additionally, number two is that you can't have an intern then fill a vacancy of someone who was previously paid or a position that was previously paid, right? So there's the second criteria. The third criteria, in fact, and this is the biggest one of all, is that you can't put someone in an intern position unless they are enrolled in a university and they're doing this as a program for some higher level of education, in fact. So realistically, the entire esports industry, in fact, is operating illegally, and it's quite ridiculous that they would be so brazen as to operate illegally like this, because it's against California labor law, in fact. And in fact, number four is that California labor law is one of the strictest when it comes to the employer versus employee relationship. And in fact, most often California sides with the employee. So that's why there's such tough regulations within California. And of course, as we all know, a lot of esports teams operate within Los Angeles. Oh shit, is that in California? I wonder. So the whole idea that you can then get away with not paying these interns is actually absurd. And at some point, I think someone's just going to get sued anyways. So that's my final saying piece. I don't think that first of all, it's ethically correct that you would not pay someone based upon their work and what they do for your company. And whether you like it or not, it actually is pushing your company forward too, because most often than not, a esports team is actually in development, right? Or an esports organization, is in development. So yeah, of course you're going to add to that building block and help that entire company or industry. Whether that is a skilled, role or not in terms of creativity, something like a journalist or something like a caster or whatnot, any of these talent type roles, they should still deserve to be paid because also it is part in law too. So I just think it's actually absurd. And in fact, what's even worse is that this entire thing was a burgeoning, in fact, there's something called a scab, and this is more prevalent within the United Kingdoms, in fact, to where a scab is someone that replaces a union worker after they go on strike, right? And they are people that will undercut the union workers in order to get work, right? And so they'll do that. When a union goes on strike, these scabs will come in and they will work and replace, the factory workers or whatever, like you're in, I don't know, like machine drilling or whatnot, or you're creating, steel or something in a steel mill. Like they end up disrupting these industries. And it's the same principle, in fact, of interns, is that it disrupts an industry. It disrupts people that deserve to be paid, in fact. And I just think that is just morally bankrupt, in fact, from both the entire esports industry as far as the team orgs or owners and just the wider esports culture as a whole. And I don't think it belongs in a place to where we are responsible for a lot of innovation and whatnot. So I just think it's completely absurd that we're going backwards in time.
Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned a little bit of the perspective of both the pros and cons of internships within esports, and I will see you next time on the next subject.